All right, well, a great deal of this budget is focused on what the government said would encourage growth in the country, would certainly encourage infrastructure development, and would ultimately generate jobs. But there's another large part of the budget when it came to social sector spending. Has enough actually been done? My colleague Mariam has more details.
The finance minister, while presenting the budget, spoke of how the government would be spending much more in the next fiscal year. But despite this promise of increased spending on the one hand, on the other, the government has slashed the budget for the rural employment scheme Manrega by 25%. Let's look at the numbers. In 21-22, the revised estimate said that for Manrega, the government would be allocating about 98,000 crore. This has been slashed by 25% to 73,000 crore. The rural employment scheme Manrega had been a lifeline for many during the prolonged lockdowns in the beginning of the pandemic. And as it's clearly seen from the work demand numbers that are up on the Manrega website. If we pull that graphic up, we can see that the increasing demand for Manrega, how it has been spiking in households demanding for work. In December 2018, we had about 1.9 crore households demanding for work. In December 2019, 1.7 crore households were demanding for work. By December 2020, during the pandemic, this demand increased to about 2.7 crore households. In December 2021, the demand remained higher than the pre-pandemic levels, with 2.4 crore households demanding for work. It's not just rural employment or rural development, it's also some other key sectors as well. The budget has not increased substantially. If we pull up the numbers for the health sector, in 2021-22, the revised estimates allotted about 85,900 crore for health. This increased to about 86,600 in 22-23. But this increase is less than 1%. Education is one place where we see some hope. In 21-22, the revised estimate said that there was an allocation of about 88,000 crore. This is increased to about 1 lakh crore in 22-23. This is an increase of 18%. Defense sector again, 21-22 versus 22-23, the budget allocation is only up by 5%.
All right, so a couple of areas where budget allocation has been fairly limited. We're going to go across to our panel at this stage, get their views of just what the budget has had to say. Pawan Goenka, the former MD of Mahindra & Mahindra, with us. Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, Nasser Salim, Kunal Sood, Richard Hild, all with us. What I'd like to do first is just go through a couple of the highlights in the budget and then try and get a couple of reactions before we go sector to sector. So let's just take a look at some of the key points. Let's bring up that graphic. A couple of the key points in the budget. All right, so key takeaways, no change in income tax. Now, it really depends where you're coming from as far as that is concerned. At a time when there has been such distress in terms of joblessness, many would have suggested that some sort of income tax relief would have been welcome, but no change. It's certainly not gone up. Total expenditure is up to 39.5 lakh crores. That's up only 4.8%. 60 lakh Make in India jobs over 5 years has been promised. There's a 30% tax on the transfer of virtual digital assets.
Yes, I can.
Digital currency, which is going to be introduced by the RBI. That's been an area of conversation as well. Let me go straight across to Pawan Kumar Goenka. Sir, is there enough in this budget to encourage growth and employment? Because, or would you like to have seen more social sector benefits for lakhs in our country?
Vishnu, as we have been saying whole day, that this budget is squarely focused on growth. And everything that you see here, including the biggest news item being the capital expenditure increasing by 35%, is focused on that. And it's these are sectors that would not necessarily give you immediate return, but sectors that will have a multiplier effect in the long run. For example, the PM Gati Shakti is perhaps one of the biggest initiatives the government of India has taken in the recent times. And in the budget speech, the Honorable FM spent significant amount of time explaining what the plans are for Gati Shakti. And Gati Shakti is not only about creating infrastructure, but also about reducing the capital or the logistic cost for the industry from about 13% to maybe about 8%, making the industry very competitive. So if you look at examples like that, this whole budget is focused on growth. Whether there could have been more in terms of employment generation in the growth sector, that remains to be debated and perhaps look at some more details. But in terms of growth, I think it's focusing in the right place. Okay. Social sector spend, as far as that is concerned, yes, it is not a budget what one would call a populist budget, and that was perhaps a bit of a surprise given elections are around the corner. And therefore, you don't see much new initiative or much new announcement in terms of social infrastructure spend. But I think quite a bit has been done in the last 2 years. These are not necessarily budget items as the requirement was. For example, the subsidies over the last 2-3 years had gone up from 2.5 lakh crore to 7 lakh crore, which has now reduced from 7 to 4 to now in the next budget 3.17 lakh crore. So I think a lot of effort has already been spent on social spending.
The Manrega allocation has come down drastically. That's I mean, it is a problem, isn't it? And,
well, I would put it this way, Vishnu, that that is the estimate that the government perhaps has for Manrega. My guess is the requirement is more, then government will increase the outlay for Manrega.
Okay. Dr. Hiranandani, let's take a look at the tax proposals and let's roll a graphic on that. Now, there are some important steps over here to simplify the process. For example, updated returns can be filed within a period of 2 years. That's actually very good news, because if you've made a mistake, you're an honest taxpayer, you aren't going to be penalized. You can say that, look, I've made this mistake, and they will accommodate that. Let's have the graphic up on this. A minimum alternate tax for cooperatives has been cut to 15%. There's a surcharge on cooperatives cut from to 7%. It was up at 12% earlier on. The deduction limit for state government employees to NPS has been raised to 14%. Long-term capital gains surcharge has been capped at 15%. But I think the big takeaway for our viewers would be there's no change in the taxation structure. But Dr. Hiranandani, your comments or your views on some of these tax proposals?
I think more could have been done, Vishnu. I think you needed to rationalize these things further. And the minimum alternative tax is something which I think is hurting unnecessarily and needed to be further reduced completely, maybe to 10% or less. So I think that was one. But on the other side, I mean, I see something which nobody's talking about also, Vishnu.
Yep.
The rate of corporate tax is 15 and 25%. The maximum rate of tax for individuals is 42%. So, I mean, what is this two parts to it? I cannot understand, and it should have been brought down drastically. We had representatives on that issue, but unfortunately, nobody is even talking about it. Yeah. How can individuals be taxed at the maximum rate of 42% and a company which is large at 25%? This is an incongruency. The other part of the story, besides this taxation part, is we were looking at something in the housing sector, where we thought that interest on home loans deduction, which is capped at 2 lakhs, is still 2 lakhs after 12 years, while house prices have gone up. We thought that should increase. It's an essential item, roti, kapda, makan. Prime Minister is talking about
But they've done something good. I mean, 48,000 crores, Dr. Hiranandani, for 80 lakh houses under the PM Awas Yojana.
That is a good scheme. Yeah. I was coming to that. 80 lakh beneficiaries will come under that scheme of the poorest to poor. This may not be applicable to cities like Mumbai and Delhi and so forth, because there is a cap of 45 lakhs of rupees for the house which you can buy. Yeah. And as you know, the land prices being what it is, this scheme may not be easily applicable to these two cities or some of the cities which have this kind of land prices. But yes, the PMAY scheme has been exceptionally useful in the country. More than 1 crore people in the last 5 years have benefited. But Vishnu, try and look at the other aspect. Mumbai, the richest city in India, has 50% people still living in jhopadpattis, slums, juggies and jhopdis.
And they don't benefit from this.
Half of them can afford a house of the size they are doing it, but we just don't construct that kind of houses because of land costs and the government costs and stamp duty and the other development charges that the government is doing. Fortunately, government had reduced, Maharashtra government had reduced stamp duty and charges for a short period of time, 3 to 6 months, and now has been restored that back. I hope that Maharashtra will again go back on that. So yes, some things on this housing in the PMAY scheme is definitely complemented. Urban infrastructure in terms of metro and other things focus is very, very good, Vishnu. I think cities need to be improved transport unless you don't have the metro systems up and going.
And there's a lot which has been done on the road network as well. So those are a couple.
Yes.
I just want to change my focus to, let's bring up graphic 8, which is virtual digital assets. There's no ban on crypto, but digital assets have been taxed. I'll ask Nasser Salim to sort of take a look at this. Firstly, the graphics themselves, what we've got, a transfer of any virtual digital asset will be taxed at 30%. 1% TDS on virtual digital asset transaction. Any transaction involving that will have a tax taken away at source, deducted at source. There will be no deductions to be allowed except the cost of acquisition. A loss from the sale of digital assets cannot be set off against gains. So, your views on digital assets and, your perspective on the digital currency, which they've also seemed to be encouraging in a big way.
Good evening, Vishnu. My first thoughts as far as the virtual digital assets is concerned is that, obviously, they're trying to tell everyone to stay away from them. I mean, that's what I can kind of make of it. Until there is clarity, regulatory clarity and compliance as far as this entire digital currency is concerned. Obviously there's been a lot of trading that is happening amongst the younger generation, genre of people. We've seen a lot of, interests coming in from there. And therefore, a mention of this is obviously, I think, been done. Clearly, so, as far as, virtual digital assets is concerned, this is all that I can say at the moment, Vishnu, because, a lot more of clarity has to emerge over the next few weeks. I think the other bigger question, and I would like to respond to some of the other panelists that would mention a few points. I think, Vishnu, purely from a employment generation perspective in sectors, which I had said in this morning as well on NDTV, I personally feel that this entire PLI and additional incentives being doled out, and also the fact that capital expenditure has been now outlined and estimated for the next financial year is a welcome step. However, I continue to feel that numbers are of course one thing. The second thing is how much of easy it can be done with execution. I think execution is something that needs to be looked at very carefully.
Right.
Also, I think as far as this entire disinvestment discussion is concerned, I've been hearing a lot of panelists mention about that as well. But I must tell you, last year's budget estimate, which will get outlined, was about
1.75 lakh crores. Yeah.
Lakh crores, exactly. And then they kind of revised that downwards to 78. And this year, for next year's budget, this year's budget for next year's financial year, they've estimated at 65,000 crores. Now, obviously, disinvestments in itself has been checkered as far as the government is concerned. And I personally feel giving a lower number, may try to be sending the right signals to the corporate markets and the capital markets. But again, a lot needs to be seen there as well. And my last point, I heard somebody mention about home loan buyers, and I was more keen to see, because again, real estate is a sector, Vishnu, which kind of propels this entire multiplier impact on job creation, right? And if you're boosting, if you give certain stamp reductions, somebody just said on the panel, to 200,000, it would have been a welcome step. I think that went missing. Number two, I think very, very important, this entire financialization of savings. Today, we're talking cryptos, we're talking about digital assets, we're talking about commodities as today silver ETFs have been launched, for example, in India, SEBI's approved those. I think I would have been happier to see some kind of a guideline. Two things. One, guideline on centralized KYC, which could kind of be given out today. Number two, also, this additional benefit on ELSS, which is equity-linked savings schemes, because you're trying to promote investments as well under stamp deductions, which could increase from 150 to 200,000. I think that's again something which kind of may have put the ball rolling.
Okay.
And my last point. Enough of tax buoyancy. We've seen GST collections have been consistently hitting 1,25,000 crores. For the last 7-8 months, we've had a very good record there. Good tax collections. But again, we keep talking about taxing the ultra HNI and HNI, but that's not fair. Look, today there are only 3 crore taxpayers in this country. We should be looking at how we can increase the funnel, Vishnu, rather than penalizing the ones who are paying taxes.
Right.
That's another point.
Right. No, that's a key point. Let me just go across to Sunil Alag, who's also with us. Sunil, let's take a look at, let's bring out graphic 7, defense, because in as much as we talk about social sector growth and we talk about infrastructure development, it's important to realize that our capital budget for defense, for our armed forces, has risen up 9.7%, but in rupee terms, it's at 13,519 crores, which in terms of defense deals, for all 3 services, it's a minuscule amount. Of course, the existing amount still caters for what our Air Force, Navy and Army want, but it's not a jump per se, and there was no mention of the defense budget by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who's been a defense minister in the past. Is that problematic?
No, look, if you look at the budget, forget about defense, forget about agriculture for a minute. I'm not trying to look at and address it to your viewers rather than the panelists. What are they looking for in the budget? As far as I'm concerned, it's a terrific plan. They've laid out a vision, they've given a 5-year plan, and they've given a 3-year plan, and everything else is there. But a budget, for me, is 25% of vision and 75% of what they're going to do in the next 9 months. That's what, for me, is the budget. Now, therefore, where it's done a tremendous job in terms of increasing capex and whatever money they had, whether it's defense, whether it's agriculture, spending on
no, but
infra,
not defense. I just pointed out that it's not happened. My question was on this entire defense thing.
Yeah, I was just going to answer the defense part, but I was saying, where does it go wrong? The budget, where does it go wrong? It hasn't said anything on inflation. Right. It's taken oil prices at $70 to $75. When it's today, it's $90 already. So once they increase the oil prices, everything else will go. So they've not actually touched on inflation at all. Forget about, I was looking forward to the lower income, middle income group getting some tax relief, not the upper end. Upper end, we know will get it. Therefore, the last year's target was in disinvestment was 1.75 lakh crores. What have they done? 8%. Anyone in the private sector would have been sacked for that. No question in my mind. So ultimately, at the end of the day, defense is between China and Pakistan, and everybody wants. They've said, look, all the villages next to the border, they're going to take care of. So let's not forget that. They're going to spend money on almost everybody along the northern
border. So that's infrastructure,
which was never done. Yeah. So therefore, defense, the amount of money that they need to spend, don't assume there is cast in stone. They will increase, they will decrease as the year goes on.
In fact, that's an important point, because a large part of our defense budget, which is on strategic assets, that's never mentioned. People don't talk about it. So that's a secret, and perhaps rightly so.
No.
So let me go across to Sri Vijay Sai Reddy, who joins us as well, and ask you this, sir. Let's take a look at another couple of important sectors, and let's look at healthcare. Now, let's bring that graphic up, graphic number 5 on healthcare. In 2021-2022, we were at 85,900 crores. We've actually seen a jump to 86,600 crores. That's up by less than 1%. For a country as large as ours, and a country which, who knows, may face several problems, even perhaps different avatars of COVID in the future, is this jump in this key social sector enough for us? Reddy Saab, go ahead.
Yeah, you are asking me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. 40% of the Indian population are covered under some health insurance scheme or other. Leave about the rich and neo-rich who need not have any insurance policy or insurance coverage. so far as medical bills are concerned. In so far as middle class is concerned, 56% of the Indian population is uncovered by any sort of health insurance. In fact, we have expected the Honorable Finance Minister and also the Honorable Prime Minister to introduce a scheme which will cover this middle class of India. And in so far as that issue is concerned, this budget, there is no reference in this budget, which is little disappointing.
All right, Mr. Sood, let's Kunal Sood is partner and at government consulting at Grant Thornton Bharat. Let's take a look at another couple of areas. Let's, for example, focus on the rural sector. So let's bring that up. Now, rural employment, which is such a key area, in 2021, 2022, the money allotted was 98,000 crores. It's actually down 25% on this occasion. Rural development is down, marginally down, it's more or less the same. But in terms of a spend on rural employment, when we're talking about rural distress, shouldn't this have been an area that perhaps more could have been done?
Yeah, Vishnu, thanks for that. So, while the numbers do reflect a current picture, but as a firm which works very closely with the government and very closely across 20 states on some of these aspects of rural development, we are also looking at the budget and the kind of indicators which are emerging a more vibrant ecosystem, an ecosystem for women, ecosystem for livelihoods, for the youth, for the farmers, which is more responsive to where they are today. And, those are some of the things that I would want to highlight today, specifically when we look at livelihoods now, where it has become a major challenge, and there is, during migration, we saw people lost livelihood. There are opportunities now in the rural areas which are being built. So what I like about the budget today is how they have been able to narrow down on certain geographies. So this new initiative for the northeastern development under Gati Shakti, I think it's a great initiative for the northeastern region to promote livelihoods. Similarly, they have looked at something very specific, which is for the border districts, again, major area of concern. Aspirational districts has been a program of the government. So what I believe, while there is an year-on-year allocation and there would be changes on that, it's important to see how the ecosystem is being shaped through the initiatives of the government. I think that's some very positive initiatives on that. And I can also talk about agriculture, where I see several of the long-term plans. For example, government's major thrust has been on crop diversification. How do we shift both for environmental reason as well as for farmers' income? How do we shift them to more market-led crops? So when the government has come up and they have introduced now about the chemical-free agriculture, it's market-led. When they're talking about working with state governments and promoting horticulture, promoting oil farm, promoting various other tie-ups with the startups, I think these are all which are going to shape the ecosystem, which will respond better.
Right.
And one size fits all is no longer, going to work for India. There have to be specific strategies for specific locations, for specific districts. And I like, even when the budget, they are making references of blocks. That's where the problem needs to be solved, and not, at a sector level or at a state level. So,
at the micro level. Yeah, I get that point. Richard Held, Executive Chair of the UK-India Business Council, thanks very much for being with us. Is there enough in this budget for you to believe that foreign investment in India, certainly, for example, investment from the United Kingdom, is a focus point for this government? Has anything been done to suggest that remains a big priority?
I think it's a very interesting budget. The way I look at it is, if you look at the forward projections on GDP, be it from under the National Economic Survey or indeed the IMF, what you're seeing is substantial growth that indicates that India is going to be one of the fastest growing economies in the next 3 years. And what this budget tells me is that Minister Sitharaman has tried to deploy the resources available to her in order to make that not only sustainable, but to achieve the level of employment that the government is aiming for over the next 5 years. There are a number of, I think, very interesting announcements that are made. not least in relation to the focus on renewable energy. I think that the amount that is being talked about in terms of hydro, in terms of investment in solar, and we haven't even mentioned the hydrogen fuel, is actually phenomenal, transformational as to how India is going to move forward into the future. In fact, if I might, 70% of carbon output will be positively impacted, or if you like, ameliorated by hydrogen fuel. That is the impact of a rollout that is being planned. So that in itself is extremely important. Right. And it's, if you like, underpinned by the statements with regard to sovereign green bonds.
Right.
There are other areas where I could also point to, for instance, the help that is being given to sunrise sectors,
right,
such as climate, deep tech, digital,
sure.
etc.
No, in fact, that is certainly an area which the government is focused on a great deal. I just want to, since I'm running out of time, I want to go back to Mr. Reddy. So, in as much as we look at this budget and analyze every aspect of it, it's predicated on a couple of key points. Number one, a good monsoon. Number two, oil prices at a certain level. Number three, no resurgence of COVID. In fact, the economic survey mentioned all of this. So it is an optimistic budget, but it will only work if a lot of external factors don't affect India and the world for that matter.
If you peruse the economic survey report, the industrial sector and agricultural sector both have been doing well, and it in the service sector is underperforming. So out of three sectors, two are performing well and one is not performing, one is not up to the mark. And with the expectation of good monsoon, the agricultural production is expected to be better, and recovery, once the economy started recovering from the COVID, and industrial sector also is expected to perform well, and we need to put our best efforts to improve the service sector also. The targeted growth in service sector is to be achieved in order to achieve the objectives of the Honorable Finance Minister insofar as this budget is concerned. Though the budget in fact, people of this country have expected this budget to be a booster dose like COVID-19 for COVID-19. However, in reality, the budget appears to be stylish, but not with substance.
All right.
So, on some of the sectors, where the government has focused, the reduction of fiscal deficit, and the improvement in the export front and development of the infrastructure. For example, for infrastructure development, 1 lakh crores have been allotted to the states, and the formula that has been envisaged and then suggested by the Finance Commission for distribution of share of taxes is made applicable even for this infrastructure distribution of infrastructure fund also, then it will be a disaster. And in fact, we request the Honorable Finance Minister not to apply the same formula as is applied for distribution of share of taxes.
Sure. Some key points,
central pool of taxes.
Mr. Reddy, that you mentioned over there.
And
thanks very much for pointing out. Sir, I need to wrap this up. I'm just slightly running out of time over here, but lots of important points. Thank you very much for raising them. We'll take a short break, come back with more.